Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Good evening, everybody. I hope your week back at work has started well. Tonight we've got Lucy's lovely show on teachers and their accents, and I'm very much considering how I'm talking currently with having a little bit of a Norfolk accent, but not when I teach. And it slips out occasionally, especially when it's windy. I'm like, oh, it's blowing a hoolie. And the kids are like, what are you talking about? But I'm quite excited for this one. Are you there, Luce?
I am, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like I've been back about a month, not 2 days, but getting there.
Oh, I'm already well into week 2 of being back, so I'm stuck into that summer term. It's a long one for us because we don't actually get the May, June half term, so we are on a 13-week slog to the end now.
Ouch, that is painful.
It is, but I do finish on the 5th of July, so I can't really whinge. That's
Yeah.
it. That's me done. So swings and roundabouts, as they say. I can also see that Beth is there raring to go, so we'll get her invited in and set up, and we will get to Beth in a moment and explain why she is here. But good evening, everybody. I should stop prattling and actually introduce my show. That would be a help, wouldn't it? Thank you, Hannah, by the way. So it is Tuesday, it is the late show. I'm back. I feel like I haven't done this in a while, even though I did it. I think my last show was the 2nd of April with the lovely Lucy Strange, where we were talking about the teaching of grammar and how it can actually be done in a lovely and fun way rather than the dry and dreary way that I'm sure many of you teachers are used to. And it certainly inspired me to have a think about the way I teach grammar. So do go back and have a listen to that. But we're down the line a bit because that last show I was actually at home in the UK. I popped back over my Easter holiday to check in with the parents. I like to do it periodically because well, it keeps my mum happy, and it's nice to go home, particularly when you live abroad like I do. And although I'm not that far away in Portugal, it sometimes does feel far away. And when I go home, although it's not the house I grew up in, it's still, I do feel, I have to confess that I revert back a little bit to teenagedom, not in the sense of, I turn up and with a pile of laundry or anything terrible like that, but my mum cooks nice food. It's kind of, you get treated a bit like a kid again, even though I am grown, kind of. Well, at least in age, I'm grown. I'm 35 years old, so I at least pretend to be grown some of the time. So that was lovely, and also a nice reset as well. Because as I just said to Hannah, I've got a long old term coming up, and it does. I mean, I know in the UK they tend to, well, they do break up the summer term with that May break, but unfortunately, of course, it does mean that you also finish that little bit later. I've heard of kind of sort of 25th, 26th, and onwards of July finishes, which is absolutely brutal. May whatever you choose to believe in be with you for that. And let's all get to the end of this academic year together in one piece, happy and satisfied. Yeah, I'm back 2 weeks in. I mean, it's madness. Mercury is in retrograde or in the microwave, as I like to say. So I am putting, and there was an eclipse, although we didn't see it over on our side of the world. But I maintain that is why kids are absolute lunatics. I also think we've seen the first bit of sunshine we've had in a while. I mean, although Portugal is fairly sunny anyway, we've had a bit of a sort of a dark kind of February, March time. So the sun is back out here, not to make any of you jealous, and I won't bang on too much. But I also think that does bring with it sort of its own kind of bit like a full moon does, its own madness. And of course, kids are dehydrated, hot and bothered, and all of that jazz. So that's interesting. Yesterday's debacle involved a grasshopper landing on one of my children's heads. It was massive, and all we were meant to be doing was looking at habitats and things around the school. Cue massive freak out and shrieking of kids. Luckily, nobody fell in the pond, but honestly, it's chaos all around. But yeah, it's good times. It's good to be back. It's always good to be here on Teachers Talk Radio. As always, there is lots and lots of things going on, so please do keep an eye out for all the various shows. There are too many to mention, but hosts are creating shows throughout the week. We all create our own content. We all want to talk to those of you who are out there, those teachers that are out there, particularly. And case in point, this evening when we meet my guest for this evening. So if you are listening to me babble on and you think, well, I reckon I could do that too, then do get in touch via info@teacherstalkradio.org or via our Twitter. Send us a direct message, and you could be doing this from the comfort of your own sofa, which is even better. And we have hosts based all around the world. Of course, there are a lot in the UK, but there's also me and a few others who are based abroad as well. So we're a nice little international family, or rather a growing international family. So we are we are growing all the time. Anyway, I'm going to stop with the intro because I could go on forever. And although I like doing it, that's not what people are here for. People don't care about what's going on in my chaotic teaching life, because you all have chaotic teaching lives of your own. So why are we here this evening? Well, as invariably sort of happens with me, I came across an article on TES by the lovely Dan Worth, and the headline was, "As a teacher, does your accent matter?" Now, I'm someone who loves an accent, primarily because I find my own really, really boring. I could be sort of from kind of anywhere in the south of England. I sort of it's fairly generic. I don't, I kind of could fit in sort of anywhere. So when I went to university in Leeds, I fell in love with a West Yorkshire accent, and I still, I mean, I haven't been up for a long time, but still when I go up, it's almost kind of, I really love it. It's really great. Love an Irish accent. I've got quite a few Irish colleagues. Um, I've got a colleague who's Canadian, so she's got a great accent as well. Basically, any accent other than my own, I find really interesting. But of course, it then led me on to, as I sort of trotted through this article, and certainly at the top it said, many school staff feel pressured to change the way they speak. But does accent prejudice really still exist in schools? And I thought, well, surely not. This is the 21st century. Surely this can't still be a thing. I mean, I know I still have friends who live up north and still refer to me as the Southern Fairy, and that's very much a joke and banter amongst friends. But I just thought, that's just a bit of fun, and certainly amongst my colleagues in international school, because we're all from everywhere, we kind of have a banter about UK accents and about regional accents. But I kind of thought that's really, in my own naivety, I guess, that's where it ended. So I posted this article out, and I asked for a bit of feedback, just for my own interest, really, more than anything. And the feedback was, I mean, I kind of to say kind of mini viral would sort of be would be a fair thing to say, and this hasn't happened since Manners Gate, as I like to call it, where I half jokingly said that I'd like to do a manners workshop for my class when I was struggling earlier in the year, and that went completely sort of off the rails as well. And there is a show about that somewhere in the archive if you care to go and look for that as well. So these stories started to emerge, and stories from teachers from all over the place telling quite upsetting stories in some cases about how they have been, and I'm going to call it accent shaming because that's really what it is. Stories from, and I'm just scrolling back through the feed now, and there are so many. There's one here that says, let me just find it. In my final teaching practice, I was told to lose my Lancashire accent from a lecturer who was obviously from Cornwall, as the kids didn't understand what I was saying. We were in South Wales at the time. I did argue back, and no, I didn't change it. There is another story, and I've scrolled through the feed and I can't find it, but it was from somebody who is Irish, and they won't mind me sharing this because they told me I could, um, that they were failed for their phonics part of their teaching placement because they were told that their accent was not sort of conducive to teaching phonics. And I found this absolutely unbelievable, and it's still going on, and there are people who are researching this. In particular, a notable name, and his name will pop up a couple of times. And I have, well, I've tagged sort of the institution that he's kind of associated with. I couldn't find a Twitter for him, but if anyone does know if Alex Barata has a Twitter, I'm hoping I'm not butchering the pronunciation of his name. He has done a lot of research into this. He's actually a lecturer in language and linguistics. Um, and he's focused on the experience of teachers with accents and how it's affected their practice, and the impact their accents have had during their careers. Um, but it's interesting because as I began to unpack this, I sort of thought, well, the fact that teachers are still being shamed for this must mean, or being sort of told off like naughty children, must mean that there's some sort of set standard for this, surely. I mean, not that I feel that there should be, although some of you out there might feel there should be. This is something we can unpack. And what I should say to you is that if at any point during the show this evening you want to call in and share your stories, share your thoughts, I'd absolutely love for you to do that because, well, one, it breaks up you having to listen to me. I mean, obviously you'll have the lovely Beth on in a moment, who has many thoughts on this. But I want to hear from people from all over, primarily because, as I said to you, I absolutely love an accent. So if you want to even share a positive story, it doesn't even have to be a negative story, then I would absolutely love to hear from you, particularly as with a show like this, which I feel could possibly get emotional for some of you, because it is emotional. Accents are so much a part of our identity, and what's interesting from my point of view is that I've always had the Mickey taken out of me, but almost for kind of the opposite reasons, in that, you know, I sound a little bit, and I'm going to put posh in inverted commas, but my my grandmother, God rest her, was so particular, and I always found that when I spoke to her, I'd almost go up kind of what I called a posh octave. So for those of you who think I sound posh in inverted commas, you've heard absolutely nothing. This was also the woman who wouldn't allow me to say toilet in her presence. I had to say lavatory. I wasn't allowed to say serviette. I had to say napkin. And there were a couple of ones in there. Oh no, I wasn't allowed. The one that really always got me, which seemed very pedantic, but there we go, was I wasn't allowed to say perfume. I had to say scent. And I'm sure these are dreadfully old-fashioned, but it's just quite funny to me, and I'm sure she's looking down on me, being very cross with me that I'm sitting here taking the Mickey. But it's it's sort of, I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum, which I think is why this is kind of quite fascinating to me, because I've had the Mickey taken out of me for being sort of posh in inverted commas, whereas I found that other people who've told me their stories, and it also dug up a phrase that I haven't heard in a long time, and I think it was Oh Blonde, I think she goes by on Twitter, told me that she actively refers to herself as sounding as common as muck. Now, I didn't think I hadn't heard that phrase in a long, long time. And I asked her about this, and she said, because I said to her, you know, is that something that was said to you, or is that something that you're kind of almost trying to reclaim in a way? And she said, no, I'm just quite happy to use it because that's kind of how I feel, but I don't feel this in a negative way. It's just kind of a big part of who I am. And I found that fascinating. But I've already digressed. So just before we get Beth on, we were talking about is there a set standard for how teachers should sound or how they should be speaking? And as it stands, the Teacher Standards Guidance, this is again me reading from this TES article, has nothing to say on accents and how teachers should communicate with a class. Instead, simply stating teachers must demonstrate an understanding of and take responsibility for promoting high standards of literacy, articulacy, which is a word I hadn't heard before, and the correct use of standard English, whatever the teacher's specialist subject. Now, again, I'm sure this is something we will talk more about, but I'm very interested to sort of get stuck into this evening, as I'm sure you all are too. So I'm going to take a breath and bring on my guest for this evening, who, well, you'll notice that she sounds very different to me, and we've already had a laugh about this. So, Beth, are you there and ready to go this evening?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. And
Oh, great.
just for anyone who isn't sure, where are you based?
Oh, I mean, really, what maybe I should have done is give people an opportunity to guess because it's
Oh,
probably,
maybe.
but I'll not. I'll not. Shockingly, I'm from Barnsley. And I even said that slightly different. So already I've started to lean into my version of RP and standard English. But as I get more comfortable, I'm sure my Barnsley accent will get stronger. The more passionate I get, my accent gets stronger. And yeah, when I kind of saw your tweets about it, it's something that's been really kind of prevalent very recently within my job and my role. I still live in Barnsley. I work for Primary Academy Trust in Rotherham, so I'm a town across in South Yorkshire. I work with a fantastic behaviour consultancy, Positive Regard, so I get a great opportunity to go up and down the country. And as I get these opportunities, the biggest thing people mention, particularly over the last 18 months, as I've been doing more roles in different places and more leadership roles and working with people from different parts of the country, the biggest thing that people comment on is my accent. So when I saw your tweet, Lucy, and then when we got to chatting, how interesting is it that I sound like this and you sound like you, and we've obviously got very similar interests in this as a topic. And just reading Dan's article, it just fires. I read the original report in 2016. I can remember it resonating. Actually, I was working in a specialist SMH school at the time in Barnsley, and I can remember thinking, actually, this is something that really resonated for lots of reasons then and still now. So yeah, how interesting.
I mean, it's been a mad adventure. I have to say, and I think it is
Mm.
interesting that we've got sort of representations from both, and I hope that people listen. Well, like Acknowledge, I know that Paul, well, both the Pauls have got an incredible accent. So we've got Paul Fosin, who has got, I think I'm right in thinking he is from Liverpool. I think he's a
Mm.
Scouse. I can't. He might tell me off for
Oh,
that, but I.
be careful.
Yep. And then we've got Irish Paul, who is our one of our fellow hosts, and then we've got some others in as well. Mr. Green, who's up there, teaches internationally.
Mm.
Hannah, who is admin this evening, I believe you are. Did you say Norfolk? I think you said to me. Although see, I'm terrible, aren't I? Paul's already laughing.
Yeah.
Yep, Norfolk. I've got a thumbs up there. Oh God, I'm going to get in terrible trouble,
I
aren't
know
I?
you. That was brave, that Lucy, having
That
a
was brave.
guess.
That was
Yeah,
brave.
that
Yeah.
that is one of my favourite things actually. When I'm working with different people or introduce people, it's like, where are you from? And as soon as you
Accent
say,
roulette. Ooh.
yeah, it's a risk, because especially when you're talking northern regions where we've got
Yeah.
some alliances where you say, Liverpool versus, it depends. It can be hot topic. So yeah, I think that is my favourite thing. Where are you from? I often get the whole then, which I think probably will happen with more accents than others. I get the repetition. Anyone from Barnsley will tell you. You say, I'm from Barnsley, and you get the repetition of the word Barnsley, and it's like, oh. And when you've heard it once, it's like, oh, great, yeah, it's cool.
Oh, no originality there, is there?
No,
Oh.
and again, it's like there's been points where, in early on in my career as a teacher, I would doing my training in a secondary school in Barnsley, and it I originally got told by the lecturer that did my final observation that I wouldn't be an outstanding teacher because of my accent, and Ofsted would have something to say about it. Now, the lesson went really well, and I'd obviously worked really hard, and I just remember feeling like it didn't necessarily bother me, but my head teacher at the time, Kate, was actually listening. I had to go to her and say, like, this is what's happened, and we had to address it as a bit of an issue with the lecturer and say, like, come on now, like, is that seriously going to be written up? As in, my ability at the time, I was a secondary geography trainee teacher. I was teaching children in Barnsley, so I weren't, and I've said this phrase many a time, and people that listen that know me will have heard me say this. In Barnsley, we know with thee and thou, so it's not you, it's thee. And I actually said, like, I'm not thee and thou in it when I'm teaching. So is this but actually when I'm sat with a child supporting them within the lesson, I will use my accent to my advantage to make that child feel more comfortable, for example. So there's obviously a difference in purpose. So we had to sort of address it, and it didn't really necessarily bother me then. And over the years, sometimes it's great. I'm really proud of where I'm from. I will openly have conversations about my accent and where I'm from. But then sometimes it can feel judgmental. And I suppose that's what struck me about Dan's article particularly, is that idea of what is it that is the discussion.
This is bizarre to me, because your story about being pulled up, was it in a placement, did you say, in a final observation?
Yeah. Well, we're in a schools direct route, so I were obviously this was my school, this was my home school, and it was a lecturer from uni that came, and the head of department, who was my mentor at the time, like, it never came up as feedback, but it was sort of the only little, like, critique. We were very much in a strong culture of critique in that school around giving accurate and feedback to trainees. At that time were really, really strong, and the only bit of critique in that final observation was my accent. And it's
just extraordinary, because your story that you're telling now, again, this came up in the comments that I received. A lot of people who went to universities and placements in Yorkshire, in Lancashire, and the feedback was the same. You're great, but you're going to have to somehow alter your accent if you but this wasn't even, they weren't even necessarily, well, in a lot of the cases, in a lot of these stories, they weren't even talking about if you were to move to another region of the UK, for example. They were talking about if you're living in the county or the region that you're from, which I thought, well, but if you're teaching in the local schools, then surely.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's I'm really struck by this kind of idea around purpose, because I'm an SMH practitioner, so kind of my specialism is behaviour, and the role that I'm in at the minute. I've worked in SMH specialist schools. I've worked in secondary and primary sectors, and actually, when I think about, for example, if we're in a situation regulating a child, I know my accent in some situations is a tool that I use. As in, how often do we have conversations in a teaching and learning conversation, or in a conversation around behaviour management? Do we talk about pitch and tone and how we project as voices, or how we change as voices for how young brains might interpret that voice, for example? Accents are part of that, especially if we're looking at working with children that might, I've just used that as an example, might have an SEMH need. If I'm working in a specialist SEMH school in Barnsley, there's something around using that, my accent, in that situation. Whereas actually, when we start to look at teaching standards, there's something in making sure that, articulacy within a literacy lesson or a phonics, like, so the purpose behind it, I think, is a really interesting conversation.
No, I think it's, and I think you're right. And I had another person say to me, who goes by, what does he go by on Twitter? Sorry, I've got so many pages. Goes by David Smith on Twitter, but I think it is a pseudonym. And he said to me that actually he's found occasions that where he's got into, or where there's been kind of escalating situations, particularly with parents, where
Yes,
him
yeah.
being from wherever he is, I think it is actually in the Midlands somewhere, and as soon as a parent hears that actually I am like you, I am from where you're from,
Totally.
I
Yeah,
am,
yeah.
it he said it's far easier to de-escalate
It
that
it can be
situation.
disarming, and then there's also a bias on the other side as well. One of the schools that are working quite a lot. I had one parent ringing in last year and saying, "I want to speak to that normal one," and they meant me. Um, and I'm like, oh, okay, and by that they meant.
None of us are normal.
No, so again, it's that actually I have seen teachers in some communities that might not be from the community that they're serving, that it's like, oh, that criticism, oh, do they think they are? They're better than me. So it's like this interpretation again, like you called yourself posh. So as much as we can talk, there's prejudice, I think, in terms of interpretation on both sides. I think, if you're working in some communities, in northern communities with strong accent, and Lucy, you came and wanted to, there might be a fragility in the perception of parents of your accent. Similarly, I feel sometimes a little bit fragile in professional settings when I'm delivering some training to a group of executive leaders. I know that's an internal fragility for me, because I've started to, in particular of it last year, during my one-to-one sessions and mentoring, I had to say, how do I address it? If I'm doing a project with other leaders in education, and that's one of the main things that in the moment. I had a colleague about 4 or 5 months ago that were from a different part of the country, and we're working on a project together, and he just kept repeating everything that I was saying, and in the moment, that's, what do I say? What do I do? How do I say, hang on, I felt uncomfortable within that moment, saying, you're making me feel quite uncomfortable that you actually you're not listening to what I'm saying, for starters, in this conversation, this collaborative piece of work. You're just obsessed with repeating what I'm saying, and actually you're making yourself look quite silly. That would have been inappropriate in that forum, but I had to start and within my sessions and work out, how do I in the moment address that as a leader in education. um so that I think again is something that um it's me tackling that. That's a personal development thing for me. And
Yeah.
again, it's another element of this conversation, isn't it, really?
Oh, for sure. And it's because essentially that person was undermining you. There's no other way
Yeah.
to really explain that. They were,
Mm,
I mean, they might have thought they were just trying to clarify. I mean, I don't know what they thought, but it's from what I hear is you being undermined, which is not okay.
yeah. yeah. And again, I think that that's what Dan wrote about a little bit, didn't he,
Hmm.
in his article. And I know that in a lot of Alex's studies, from what I've read, it's that the social cultural point of view of accents and the prejudice around it is that we've got comfortable in calling out prejudice in other arenas around other things, and quite rightly so. Um, and I'm not sure that in terms of regional accents and interpretation of them that we've probably got that right yet. But I'm almost certain, though, to be honest, if that person, that example I've just given, I did be very upfront and say, you make me feel real uncomfortable, I'm almost certain that person would have probably been mortified. Um, but it's like, it's again, that's a me thing to kind of think about, in a way.
Oh, most definitely. Um, I've got a question for you that I suspect I know your answer to, but I'm
Mm.
going to ask it to you, and then I'm just going to do a quick sponsor message so you have time to think about it. So,
Okay.
do you think there is a hierarchy of accents? So I'll leave you to ponder that one just while I introduce you to a lovely new sponsor that we've got, which is Teachwell Toolkit. It's a multi-award winning company equipping school communities to build a culture of staff and pupil mental health. They are a DFE approved provider of senior mental health lead program and have trained over 100 schools to date. Feedback has highlighted how beneficial schools have found the training and commented on how Teachwell Toolkit understands the mental health challenges faced by staff. Teachwell Toolkit was founded by school leaders Steve Waters and Sunetta Bagri. Sunetta and Steve are qualified MHFA instructors and mindfulness teachers. They have an impressive portfolio of skills to support school staff, including counselling, coaching, supervision, and mediation. By signing up to Teachwell Toolkit's Senior Mental Health Lead training, you'll have access to a fully resourced, unique program which will support you every step of the way in your role as a senior mental health lead in your school. And both Sunetta and Steve were recent guests for Hannah and Tom Rogers, and I believe that is available to listen back to on all your preferred platforms. So do go and have a listen to them discussing Teachwell Toolkit if you get the opportunity. So hopefully, Beth, that's given you about 20 seconds to
Yeah.
think about an answer to that question. Now, I obviously don't want to predict your answer; it'd be unfair on you. But
Mm.
I suspect you do have some thoughts and feelings on this. So I'm going to let
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Uh, yes, I feel that there is. Yeah, I think there is. I think that particularly when we start to talk about like received pronunciation, again, thinking about what studies are telling us, that teacher standards are saying that there's no preference, but yet we're sort of obsessed with it. And I think there'll be certain regional dialects, particularly, my accent being one of them, my experience being one of them, that some I've been in situations where some people's accents have been commented on more than others. I've been in conferences and situations where, for example, I was listening to somebody speak around the north-south divide in education, and it weren't political in any respect. It was talking about a study that had been done, and the presentation of the children with the most difficulties was given this really overt false northern accent, um, and the children that were kind of used within this case study, the presenter used a southern accent or a more refined accent. I said southern then. See, that's my bias there, you see, because it works both ways. I will automatically, sometimes unconscious bias or conscious bias in my case. Well, if I'd have met you, Lucy, you're right, I'd have gone, oh God, she's quite posh. I wonder where she's from. I'd do that. Of course I would, like I would. Now, so again, in that situation, like even that as a case study, the child with the most struggles was given a northern accent, a really broad Yorkshire accent, um, and the child that was doing better didn't have that accent. Now, what happened in that situation, I were asked it were like it were a conference, but it were like a bit of a table talk, and he asked for my opinion, and this this person got really quite embarrassed when I started talking because he did a Yorkshire, like a Barnsley accent. And I said, oh, it's going to be really embarrassing because I sound like that fake accent that you've just done. And he did go a bit red. So they sort of like, and I was like, it's okay, it's fine. Because again, there's certain situations. I'm so proud of him from Barnsley. Like, I, I use my dialect as well, you know, when I work across 14 schools, and sometimes like in my tweets, for example, I put rate. I run a community group that supports mental health, and my tagline, if you like, is be right, because that's what we say. We say everything be right. So actually, people say it all the time to me, and I'm proud of it, you know. So, and why shouldn't I be? You know, like I want children within my community across Barnsley to see and hear people like them, and that are able to articulate what they think and feel, and that are able to, because again, it's really important that we use who we are to be good role models, and I think, but I think in terms of a hierarchy of accents, it goes back to what I've said is around the purpose. Like, you know, at the end of the article that we're on TES, it's like, well, we need to have what is the understanding of the issue that we're talking about? So is it, because for me it's sort of split. It's you know, when we're teaching and we're talking about literacy and we're talking about oracy and we're talking about standard English, that sort of feels like a separate conversation, that to um ex- celebrating heritage within schools that we're teaching in. Does that make sense? I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
you bringing up oracy as well is an important one, because this seems to be the kind of, this I think is going to be
Mm,
the next it. I mean, I know people have been talking about it for a while, but I think this is going to be the kind of it thing of
yes.
2024, and it's certainly in the back of my mind at the moment, after
Mm,
we've done some recent kind of performances in a day and sort of things like that, and also just
yeah.
listening to how kids are relating to each other just day to day at the moment. These things
Mm,
are so important, but also in everyday life, wherever they are in the UK or indeed the world, you're not going to just be exposed to people who sound like me, for example,
absolutely.
because
Yeah.
that's not reality.
Mm,
And I just
mm,
want to kind of pick up on a couple of things, just relating to kind of this part of the conversation, because I think this is really interesting as well. And this goes back to Barata again, who I hope I'm not
yeah.
butchering his name. And he said that often it's the same regional accents rather that come under fire, and the same accents that teachers feel they need to adapt, because you talked about adapting your accent in certain
Yeah.
situations. Um, and the example he gave here, in the sort of when talking about hierarchy, if two people had an interview for a job and they effectively had the same type of CV and the right skills, then the person with a certain accent
Yeah.
likely to be perceived more favorably is the person with RP, or received pronunciation, who is essentially, for those who are
Yeah.
confused, sounds like me.
Mm,
Um, but
yeah.
this certain accent is still RP, although a version of it that is not quite as poshed and clipped as 1930s BBC.
Yes.
Because and I do think you know, accents have changed and evolved, and certainly if you listen to those very sort of clipped, I can't even do it. It's a very sort of
Yeah. I
strange way of
certainly
speaking.
can't.
It's it's apparently now more a broader type of Southern accent,
Mm,
often dubbed estuary English, is the more common, correct, in inverted commas,
yeah.
form of accent. But of course, BBC now, you've got well, of course, across all the sort of news platforms, you've got kind of a regional news program as well, which I think is
Yeah.
very important, with usually hosted by people from
Mm,
those regions, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. Um,
mm,
and then just on that, just a little bit further, this is sort of more detail into Alex Barata's research, where he said North Midlands, North and people from the North and the Midlands, I'm trying to now articulate properly, were more likely to be told to modify their accents, even if teaching in their home region, as opposed to fewer such directives from teachers deriving from the South or the home counties. In terms of specific phonological guidance, below are some of the findings, which perhaps are relatively uncontroversial and others more so. So, Northern teachers, Beth, you'll dislike this one actually. I'll say you'll like it, you won't like it at all. Northern teachers told to avoid the monophthongs, which I can't even say, O and E as heard in words. So if I say go and day, and then you say it,
Go and day. There you go.
they want it to sound more. Well, the idea is that it sounds more like I sound rather than and also Northern Midlands teachers told it. This one I want to really talk about because oddly enough, I think I'll end up agreeing with you on this. Northern and Midlands teachers told to use Southern pronunciations for words such as bath and bus.
I mean, not only that, Lucy, but me trying to say it like you is just a let's use it's just a rate laugh. Like I would, particularly starting my career in a secondary school in Barnsley. Can you imagine what a group of Year 11 geography students would have done if I'd have tried to emulate that? No way.
Oh,
I mean, but again, I do know that in certain phonics schemes that they will give you regional variations on certain phonological sounds and how we teach them, and yeah, like absolutely. Like let's think about adaptation rather than just this obsession of the right way. Like I think that's where I think we sort of kind of start to blur the boundaries. And again, it's yeah. But what have I got to say it like? Say it again.
so what
What
was it?
say bath. 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 There you go. Done it. And
I'm
this
so
is it.
proud.
And I need the people that meet me and other people with regional to stop repeating how we're saying things. It's just you're not funny. You're
No, it's
really
not
not
funny.
funny.
No, I mean I know we're kind of joking about it now, so please note
Yeah,
that
we
this is
are.
kind of a laugh
No,
along, not a
it's in
laughing at.
jest. I absolutely. I listen.
Yeah.
I live this. And again, I suppose just to turn it a little bit. I've got a colleague that's probably listening right now, who is also from Barnsley. I don't see him getting pulled up as much as what I do.
That's
Now, so
interesting.
again, I don't know whether this is a fragility within me, but it's something I'm really hyper aware of that I don't see male colleagues that I work with from Barnsley, get sort of, and again, I know some people are not mocking me to be cruel, but I don't see it happen as much, which I find an interesting thought. I'm not saying it's fact, it's just obviously my experience interpretation, but I do wonder whether is it because I'm a female sometimes? I don't know. I'm crossing a line, Lucy. I'm going for it. Why
Well, no,
not?
I don't think you are. I think this is interesting because I mean I have thoughts and
Mm.
feelings when it comes to in general when it comes to kind of male colleagues versus female colleagues, and let's be clear, this is not about to turn into a man hating
No,
exercise or
no,
anything
it
like that.
isn't. Absolutely not.
Because no. But I sense that I don't. I mean, for what my opinion is worth on this matter, and people who are in listening to this, do chime in, do share your thoughts.
Mm.
Um, I do. I mean, as in general, as women, we have to fight harder. And whilst we're not going to get on the feminist soapbox too much, which I could easily as well, I do think that you probably have a point.
Mm.
I
Yeah, I just feel like as though. So let me give you another example, and the vast majority of these are from the last 12 to 18 months. One of the comments that got made, and I suppose this is a cross issue here. I was working in a school, and it kind of got back to me that a member of staff said, "Oh, who'd have thought that somebody that looks like her would sound like that?" Okay, so there's a lot of things going off there. Number one, don't judge me by how I look. Number two, what do you mean? Is it I was wearing a suit at the time? Is it because there's a lass from Barnsley in a suit that's coming and helping you and in a position of leadership, or is it? So I instantly went there in my brain, and I didn't overly. I had to be really discerning in my reaction, because in my mind I thought, well, what that comment, it was loaded in so many different sort of judgments in a way. I would judged be what I looked, what I looked like, potentially what I was wearing, but what I sounded like, and that was one of the situations that was upsetting. I'm usually quite blasé because I'm so proud of my accent, but that did upset me, because I was just like, well, I did wonder in that moment that, there were a male colleague that's from Yorkshire. We're in a Yorkshire school, it's not as though we were anywhere outside of the region.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher, or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more, and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
And that didn't get said about him. So that's been a big one, really, that I've been quite probably hyper aware and hypersensitive around as well.
But I think I think that it's very easy to kind of be like, oh well, it's in your head, it's in your head. But as you say, don't get me wrong, there were stories that came from men when I originally sort of went on this little escapade of mine through Twitter and through the research. But generally they seemed a bit more sort of, they would tell, some were quite sort of almost not flippant about it, which is kind of, yeah, this happened and kind of I moved on. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Whereas with the women who told and I don't know, and again, this kind of, again, we don't want this to become a men versus women thing, but
No.
there seemed to be more emotion attached to, and maybe again, as a woman reading them, maybe that's kind of me sort of reading into that, but they seemed more emotionally charged, the stories. Maybe I'm wrong, and again, people who are listening in, dive in here, because you might feel like we're going down a dangerous stereotype.
No, well, maybe there's something in that. Is there a difference between commentary and judgment? Because actually, it's the interpretation of, again, oh God, I love your accent. I get that all the time. Like, I get that, oh, I said it again, I love your accent, that's commentary on what I sound like. Whereas some comments, there's judgment. And then, again, it goes back to that thing I keep saying, it's understanding the issue. So up until, early on in my career and throughout my career, I've had commentary on what I sound like and how I speak. More recently, I felt more judgment, but again, I'm still trying to work out, is that because of of me and my interpretation, or what's been said, and I've got to be really clear in 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 that, and break down that intention. But then why should I sit here and try and work out what that person meant? That's me spending time and energy working that out, when actually there's other people across teaching from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, that don't have to do that. So again, is it a commentary, which I think probably leans more into celebrating accent, or is it a judgment, which is potentially that hierarchy of an accent? So I think that's probably, there's a difference in me.
Oh, most definitely. And what's very striking to me though is that, in again talking about this hierarchy, which I think will be, and still is sadly, a running theme, but will also be kind of a sort of a theme throughout this show. I think, yes, there's a sort of, you know, the situations you talked about, but more kind of widely in schools, do you think that there
Yeah.
is a snobbery now as well? And I am going to use the word snobbery because I
Mm,
think that is in large part what we're dealing with here. I
mm,
mean, do you feel that it is kind of, it's sort of almost wider than just sort of, amongst ourselves and amongst, I mean, you have talked more widely about kind of conferences and situations you've gone to,
mm,
but the idea that, you and I, for example, just as we're here, could
mm,
rock up to the same interview. I mean,
yeah.
I do not possess the experience that you do, so it's probably a slightly dodgy comparison. But for argument's sake, let's say it's
Yeah.
you versus
Yeah.
me, same CV. The idea that because I sound like this, and you sound like you do, that I would have the upper hand,
Mm,
even now, is bizarre to me. And the fact that, that people going for these jobs and going to these schools and being turned down, or being told that if we
mm,
do offer you this job, you're going to have to modify your accent. And this
yeah.
this still goes on. It's in the research.
Mm,
Alex Barata talks about it. It's all over Twitter, or X as we now call it. That was a shocker to me as well. And again,
yeah.
maybe I just live in my weird little bubble. I
Well,
don't know.
I suppose in a way, is it in teaching, or like what other industries, sectors does that happen in? So, for example, there's for loads of reasons, it's not just about the accents, but there was some research out, weren't there, a few years ago, around for example, call centres being based in the north of England and in parts of Scotland, um, because the accent is deemed more trusting and warm, or some certain accents. I'll have to find it. I should have found it in preparation for this, really. So, people, you'll get a call from a call centre that's got a certain regional accent. There's evidence that suggests that you're more likely to be listened to. Whereas what we're saying in this, and from this research, is that it potentially will be, um, it's used in prejudice. So why is that within teaching? Is it even though the teaching standard says to promote high standards of literature, like, accents don't come into it? So I wonder why. Is it leaders? Is it a cultural leadership thing? Uh,
Ah, that's an interesting thought, because
is it that?
it's possible. I mean, and this is why conversations like this are so important and so good, and I think why this is one of many reasons why this has piqued so many people's interest, because this is still happening everywhere. Like, there is
Mm,
no shadow of a doubt, and I think it's important to keep reiterating this throughout the show. This is not just something that I kind of dreamt up, or indeed Dan Worth when he wrote his article, or Alex Barasha, who continues to do huge amounts of research on this.
mm,
This is going on. This is happening live and in our, in our schools, and indeed in other workplaces around the UK and around the world. Um, it's, is it because, in inverted commas, certain people are getting into leadership and therefore they feel they're now in a certain position, so they're
mm,
modifying, or kind of almost policing themselves in some way, therefore they now feel that
yeah.
those that they're hiring or those that they're dealing with, that they have to do the same thing for whatever reason. I'm just going to break off from it because I can see my fellow Teachers Talk Radio host, who's actually relatively new to the family, Chris, is in and wanting to say something. Chris, what piqued your interest? And good evening to you as well. Hello.
Good evening, Lucy. How are you?
I'm all right, sir. How are you?
Yeah, great. I'm really glad I caught this podcast because I was looking forward to this all week because I think it's a big issue, and you can obviously tell from my accent where I'm from, hopefully. But even now, as I'm talking to you, I'm modifying my accent. I'm not actually speaking the way I would speak to, say, my mum or my dad or whoever, because I just still feel that I'm having to do that now. I don't actually do that at work, and when the podcast went out, the post went out about this, I've just commented saying that I actually find it more difficult to speak the way I would quote unquote like to speak when I'm speaking in external meetings. So I work with the exam board. I do a lot of standardization and such, and when I'm doing that, I often tend to be the only, not just someone from the northeast, but the only northern person as well. So I've actually been quoted as being the resident northerner in the group, and so yeah, so how I mean, it's all tongue in cheek, and actually they're really nice, to be fair. But it does often think, oh, okay, so because of maybe my accent, and I think Beth mentioned the cultural aspect as well. Maybe it is a cultural thing as well, but simply the accent has went right. Okay, that's where they're from, and that's what we're going to associate them as. And but honestly, like in the classroom, I tend not to find any problem with it at all, because a lot of my students are, so the demographic of students that we have are very much widened participation, very much got similar accents, so it's not a problem. But I'm more aware in meetings, and
Yeah.
I've just said the word meeting there, and notice how I'm saying meeting, and like even things like that, I would normally say meeting. And I
Yeah.
have to say that so that you can and other people can understand. And if there's one or two people from the south, and I'm not trying to do a north-south divide thing here at all, I'm actually
This is not here to
secretly
cause absolute misery. I knew you had an ulterior
absolutely
motive.
not, absolutely not. But I'm no, and in actual fact, I'm actually quite jealous of the southern accent because I think it's so much more, acceptant. And so when that happens, I go, okay, right. I need to almost accommodate them rather than them having to do it for me. And it's just, I'm always aware. I suppose that's the main point I'm trying to make here. I'm always aware of how I speak, and that never leaves you as a quote unquote northerner. You know.
I completely agree, Chris, and I think you've probably hit the nail on the head really in terms of like what I think. I think when I'm working with children and when I'm teaching, I don't change particularly my accent, but definitely in meetings. And I suppose that's probably the difference that I felt, particularly over the last 12 months as I moved to a central leadership role and working with my wider professionals and like I said, conferences and delivering training and going to meetings with different people from up and down the country. 100% agree with what Chris has said, is that, there's a more of an awareness that you have to sort of, I think, yeah, brilliantly put, you accommodate other people to understand my accent, and Chris has obviously said same, rather than the other way around. It even to the point when Chris has just said my mum and dad, like my mum is saved as mam in my phone book. So I was sat next to somebody in a meeting and she started ringing me up going towards the end of the day and it said mam, and I thought it were hilarious that I got it saved as mam in my phone book on my
Yeah, and,
phone.
and, and, and like when you like Mother's Day, like for example, it's like you can't find mum in the card shop anywhere. You have to almost get
Mm,
mum and just explain, sorry, I tried to find mum,
mm,
but I couldn't get mum. So,
yeah,
even in the Northeast, we're still very much
yeah,
nobody in the Northeast calls the mum. No one does. But
no,
even in the card shop, we're accommodating for the southern accent and the way that southern, but
yeah.
so even in them situations, we have to modify our language and modify our ways as well.
Mm,
So
mm. Yeah, no, I think absolutely brilliantly put that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one that I always like, it doesn't sound right in my accent, but you Northerners would never say cup of tea either. Like, you would never. What is it?
No,
no,
What is
coffee
it?
cup of
Or
tea, yeah.
or a brew.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Whereas if I it doesn't sound right in my voice, if I say a brew, it doesn't sound right in a southern. I'm sorry, it sounds wrong. Like
Yeah.
I'd love for that to sound right in my voice, and it doesn't. It sounds terrible. I'm also, and I'm acutely aware that this is before the watershed, so we cannot actually say any swear words. But I am going to put it out there, even though this is Teachers Talk Radio, that swear words do sound better in northern accents. They
Oh,
just
yes.
do. They just
They
do.
do.
But we can't unfortunately go there,
No.
which is a real shame. We'll do it off air. But anyway, back to sensible-ish matters. What I wanted to kind of sort of move on to is, well, we're kind of all talking about the same thing here, and we've talked about the hierarchy. We've talked about teachers kind of adapting their accents and sort of, and it's strange to me, I guess, but I suppose this is again part of the sort of whole north-south divide thing, where it's
Mm.
actually no, you have to adapt to, even though there is no R in Bath or Path. And you actually reminded me of something when we were talking about this. When I was at university in Leeds, and this became a running joke very, very quickly, the sort of standard phrase that we were all made to say to each other was, well, obviously I'm going to say it in Southern. I laughed to see a giraffe go down the path to have a bath, which even in my it doesn't sound right because there's no R in any of those words. Whereas if
Mm.
one of you two were to say it, it sounds right.
Yeah.
So how do you say that again? So I'll try it for you. What is it? Sorry.
I laugh to see a giraffe go down the path to have a bath.
I laugh to see a giraffe go down the path to have a bath. There you
Mm.
go.
Lovely. Beth, your turn.
What was it?
I laugh to see a giraffe go down the path to have a bath.
I laugh to see a giraffe go down the path to have a bath.
Yeah, see, that just
There
sounds
you
sounds sounds
go.
much sounds much better.
Yeah, and like, so for example, if for whatever reason, whatever subject, whatever phase, stage, age, we were delivering that in a classroom, and we had to modify it for the audience, for the children, why? That that's the question. Like, why would you have to? Do you know? Is that again? Is it back to purpose, or is it back to if you were teaching outside of the region that you aren't from? You know, that's, I think, is interesting. I keep going back to it, purpose. So what is the point? Why? Because again, it's that purpose and judgment.
Hmm.
You know.
Um, yeah, it is. I'm going to give you something else to ponder for a moment, and I'll give you a bit of time to do this. It's kind of okay. So we know that this bias is still experienced by teachers up and down the UK, maybe even further afield as well. I can actually see one of my international colleagues who's actually requested to speak, and I can see him there. So we'll come to you, Mr. Green, in a moment because I suspect you've got some things to say on the international circuit. I've completely forgotten what my point was. This is what happens to me. Yeah, it's kind of what sort of what can we do here? We know kind of what the problem is. We know that teachers are still experiencing this, that this is kind of still an ongoing thing. It's still being researched, it's still being written about. So what can we do to kind of make teachers feel like, well, it's kind of, this is an inclusivity thing really at the end of the day,
Mm,
isn't it? And this is about there's sort of almost kind of forms of well, no, not almost, there are forms of discrimination happening. There are biases that are still alive and well. We know that, but we need to kind of move on from this. We need to move forward. This is the 21st century. We're still kind of stuck in
mm,
this kind of BBC English idea that we touched on earlier. So have a ponder and come back to me in a moment with some thoughts. So just so you are aware, everybody, we've got a lovely new sponsor. It is Teach Well Toolkit, which is a multi-award winning company equipping school communities to build a culture of staff and pupil mental health. They are DFE approved, and they are also a provider of the senior mental health lead program, and have trained over 100 schools to date. Feedback has highlighted how beneficial schools have found the training and commented on how Teach Well Toolkit understands the mental health challenges faced by staff. Teach Well Toolkit was founded by two school leaders, Steve Waters and Sunetta Bagri. Sunetta and Steve are qualified MHFA instructors and mindfulness teachers. They have an impressive portfolio of skills to support school staff, including counselling, coaching, supervision, and mediation. By signing up to Teach Well Toolkit's Senior Mental Health Lead training, you will have access to a fully resourced, unique program which will support you every step of the way in your role as a Senior Mental Health Lead in your school. Now, interestingly, just even in very consciously reading that sponsorship script through that ad script, I was kind of having to articulate very, very carefully. And, I almost kind of based that on sort of ads that I've heard before. And I'm just trying to think of sort of examples where I've heard sort of accents that aren't, that sort of are more northern than mine. And often you find, like, even when thinking about sort of commercial radio and things like that, I think it's broadening out a little bit, but still, when I'm sort of thinking of who I know of in radio and things like that, I think it's more often than not, it is people that sound more like me, which is a shame, apart from regional radio. But anyway, that's digressing. Beth, before I come back to you, I just want to, so you have actually a little bit longer to ponder sort of our moving forward, and I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this as well. I just want to come to Mr. Green, who also teaches internationally. Getting a little bit of an echo there, Mr. Green.
I've just logged onto the microphone. That's all.
Ah,
Hi.
there you go. How are you doing, sir? I haven't spoken to you in a while.
I'm grand. It's lovely to speak to you again.
Good. Just as a reminder to listeners, where are you?
So I'm currently in Egypt. I'm teaching history in an English school in Egypt, and for the record, where I am, it is past the watershed, so I can swear.
Well, we do subscribe to Davina rules, which, if you're old enough to remember early 2000s Big Brother, it's the live on Channel 4. Please do not. So I refer to it as Davina rules, and I'm sure Tom Rogers, who is listening in, is cringing in the background because I refer to it far too regularly. But yes, in the interest of keeping this above board, please do not swear.
Absolutely.
So, just as an international teacher, and I don't want to kind of dwell too much on this, but where are you from originally?
So I'm from the very, very deep south, and so I'm from Devon, and there was some discussion earlier on about regional rivalries up north, and I can absolutely assure you on my bones there is equally a rivalry down south, because I've been referred to as Cornish and ended friendships over it.
Oh gosh.
We are very, very different people, and we are not to be confused. They put the jam on first,
I was waiting for Scongate
it's
to
obscene,
rear
is
its
what it
head.
is.
Right. Okay.
It's obscene. I mean, wars have started over less. So no, we do have our distastes down south as well, but no. So yes, the things I wanted to sort of add to this conversation, there's two, and I'm going to come back to the international. I'm going to put that on the back burner for now. But Beth, who was so eloquently talking a minute ago, was talking about the reasons, the why, the sort of the ultimate tell-us for why we do the things we do, and I'm going to refer back to my ITT mentor. So the woman that taught me to teach originally in my first very vulnerable year of teaching in a brutal secondary school just outside London. She was a Scottish woman who had moved down south. Now her accent was quite difficult to perceive to the untrained ear, and she was very conscious of this when she moved to England. Now the maxim that she would return to over and over again, the one that sort of guided me, was that teachers in English should be teachers of English. And by that, she means that the students learn from us not just from what we explicitly teach them, but what they absorb from us in all of our interactions. So that we should try and express ourselves in the best possible terms is one of our duties as educators. Now, something that I've thought before, and something that I've put out there before, is that it's our responsibility as educators to remove our personal idiosyncrasies so that we can get across our subject matter more clearly. And this came very much from my mentor. She, I very much struck a chord with her. She was a fantastic woman. If she were to speak in her home dialect, she would border on being, insensible to Southern ears. I mean, you physically couldn't understand her, and she knew this. And this is the motto that she instilled in me. So as much as these accents should be celebrated, the reason I think that we should moderate ourselves is for the clarity of the subject that we teach.
Interesting, very interesting indeed. I mean, I just the comment. What was the comment about teaching English again?
So all teachers in English are teachers of English.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's really interesting. Beth, I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably more articulately put. The what I said right at the beginning when I was training to be a teacher, when I said I'm not the environment when I'm teaching. So again, when I was teaching the subject matter, again removing the idiosyncrasies, and again I think for me it's two separate conversations. It's when we are teaching, absolutely making sure that we express ourselves in a way that the most important thing is the things that we're teaching. But then obviously, I think going back to your question of what can we do about this, again, it's the celebration of and giving the celebration to regional accents for our children, in terms of just building up that ability to be able to explicitly and deliberately teach the celebration of our accents. But again, it's making sure that we do that in the right way, in the right forum. So lots of us, when we're teaching whatever we are teaching, there's a performance element to what we are doing, particularly if we're teaching in a we're delivering a phase of learning that needs children to be able to listen to us, and that performance obviously needs to be done in a way that children can understand us, because there's always got to be clarity and precision in how we teach, because that makes us good teachers, right? But obviously then sometimes you can see it when you're observing teachers, that when the work in the room, when they're talking to children one-to-one, you might still be within that lesson, but you can hear the difference between the performance of the teacher when they're delivering the subject matter, and again removing that them as we've just said, the personal idiosyncrasies around the delivery, but then kind of using them to reinforce and communicate one-to-one with children. I think, and again, there's that difference, I think. But I think for me it is celebrating. My accent is a strong part of my identity. Like most people that work with me know how proud I am of my accent. I lean into it sometimes. So when I'm delivering training, it's part of my performance is my accent. I own it. I've reclaimed my accent. So I think, how do we teach his children to do that as well and be proud of his heritage?
I think that's super cool, super cool. Beth, I will promise I will come back to you on, because I want to. I'm very keen, actually, both of you. I'll talk to about this, but Beth in particular about this moving forward aspect. But just while we've got a little bit of time, Mr. Green, I just want to come back to you quickly and just as international, just between international teachers, and this might be deeply dull for everybody else, but I think it bears mentioning. I don't know if you found that. I mean, certainly in the school I'm in, children, I was about to say kids then, but I suppose this kind of plays into what I'm saying here. They lean into a lot of Americanisms, and I found that I've kind of picked those up and sort of they kind of, and this sort of seems to happen in the international community, because a lot of people learn American English, that kind of, as much as we are a British international school, as is touted around in the school I'm in, you're in a British school, therefore, it's British, English curriculum and diddly dee. But there are certain spellings and things, for example, that I will let go. Or like if a child says trash to me, I know what they mean. Trash is not something I would say. I would say rubbish. I wouldn't say sidewalk. I would say pavement. And I suppose this is more kind of, sort of talking about something a little bit different here, but I don't know if in your kind of
You
international.
couldn't be more on the nail, and you're absolutely right. It is very much exactly the same here. The families that can afford to send their children to international schools want their children to speak in an American accent, and the American accent is much more preferred than the English. We are seen as fussy and uptight and irrelevant, whereas the American accents are seen as beautiful and mellifluous and wealthy, and they would much prefer their children to have a American drawl than a British sort of stiff upper lip. So much so that there are, I think, 7 American schools near me, and there is 1 British school. So I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. But harping back to the repetition of Barnsley, which I just thought was hysterical and a little bit cringy, because I've done that myself, and I did want to curl into a ball and die when I heard it. But so the classes that I teach have sort of, almost exclusively had young American teachers and Egyptian teachers, and I'm one of the few Brits that they've encountered on a regular basis. And that exact thing has happened to me when they have asked to go to the toilet, and I'm like, sure. Off you go to the loo, and they go, oh, the loo. And it's just the funniest thing, because they think that is adorable. And it's quite undermining. Yeah, well, it's quite undermining when you have a room full of sort of year 7s and year 8s chiming your accent back to you because they think it's sweet and funny and kitsch. And I'm like, no, I'm in charge. Stop making fun of me. But they do.
Do you get the bottle of water thing as well?
Oh, I literally had that conversation today.
Yeah.
Literally had that conversation today. Yeah, but they're indoctrinated by social media and by television, which is overwhelmingly, American. I've known of tutors of students here that have prescribed them to watch Friends to improve their English, because it is easy to understand. It is spoken at a speed that can be comprehended quite easily by a second language speaker. They're not prescribing EastEnders. No, they're prescribing Friends, because the mum and dad want their little darling to end up speaking with an American drawl. So
that's so interesting, because I had, interestingly, and I'm sure I've told this story before on Teachers Talk Radio. I end up repeating a lot of my stories, but they end up being relevant in lots of different contexts. So that's why I repeat myself regularly. But it's also in the nature of being a teacher, so I'm sticking to my guns on
if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times.
Exactly.
It is your own time you're wasting.
Exactly. Oh gosh, I think we can have a whole show devoted to. I'm sure we have done it in the past. Teacherisms. So where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So I had a class last year which did actually include one American girl. So I forgive her, but and it was a joke, but they took it so badly, bless them. They were deeply humorless bunch. And I said to them, I'm absolutely horrified. And I kind of put on a sort of bit of a sort of more clipped voice. I said, I'm absolutely horrified that you've had me as a teacher all year and you all sound American. They sort of looked around at each other and went, can she say that? Can she say that? I don't know if she can say that. I'm like, boys and girls, I'm joking, but I do find it quite interesting that actually there's only one American in here, and yet you all sound. And they didn't take it well.
I know that my American colleagues are fawned over for the way that they speak, whereas I'm seen more of a eccentricity than the norm. But no, years before I taught here, I taught over in China, and in China they explicitly market American lessons as opposed to English lessons. Come to here, and we will teach you American as opposed to teach you English. And it's what sells. So I mean, it's much more, especially where I was, much more explicit in China. But it's what is wanted on an international scale.
Hey, I might do that in the north. Come here to learn Northern.
Hey, what?
That might be quite exactly. That might be quite interesting.
Yes, I'm so here for this.
Well, I might do that. That
she said something about being grim up north. I don't know.
I'm in. This is it. This is your call. Yes, let's do this. I want to join. I'm your first customer. I'm there.
Totally. Come on, I'll teach you. 100%. Yeah, I think just what you both say is really interesting. To be fair, because I sort of just listening to what Mr. Greaves just said about speed of speech, and going back to what Chris said around regulating as accents. It's not just about pronunciation. So, for example, myself and a colleague, Jacob, that I know is dipping in and out of listening to this, it's also from Barnsley. When we're talking to each other, the speed in which we speak is incredibly quick. And I didn't even realise this until I started teaching and I started delivering, because I didn't know that my accent is quick. And similarly, when I were on holiday in Indonesia, and I forget how quick just English is to English speaking people from Great Britain, and that's something that particularly within when you're delivering any form of teaching of language, whether that be vocabulary within a specific subject or whatever it is that you are teaching, that's where that articulation, speech, accent, that it all sort of amalgamates into one thing, that certain accents do have to think about when they are teaching, and I do think that again, removing the important thing is what we're teaching, and also just thinking about what you're both saying. I, as leading inclusion, and particularly when I've got my Senko hat on, and I'm thinking about working with children with additional needs, we're seeing a lot of American accents come through across a lot of our cohorts. And again, like I said previously, Lucy, oracy is really hot topic, and lots of our children, particularly in our primary sector, we are seeing American accents come through in the middle of Rotherham. So again, it's accents and are definitely coming through in that situation as well.
Interesting, very interesting indeed.
YouTube.
Right. Oh, don't, honestly. Right, we are rapidly approaching the end of this show, but before we kind of get there, there's we kind of, I mean, I do feel, I mean, that we haven't actually brought it down as much as we could have done. We have touched on the serious things, we have talked about it, and I do think that, jokes aside, and yes, we have had a great laugh on this show this evening, but I do think there is an emotional element to this. I do think there's a hugely important elements to all of this, and the fact that we are even having this conversation means that this is still a thing. And sort of when we're talking about accent hierarchy, when we're talking about teachers being judged on their accents rather than actually the fact that they are incredible teachers, all these things, whether it's in teacher training, whatever it is, this is still alive and well, and this is extraordinary to me. But just listening to Beth share her story this evening, listening to all the other stories, or reading all the other stories on X or Twitter, as some of you still know it as. I still can't quite commit to the X thing, and I think that a lot of people are in the same boat. Before to kind of sort of bring things back up again, and sort of refer back actually to the article that inspired all of this, there's another part I want to read you, and just Mr. Green, you can even chip in on this as well. But Beth, I will start with you. And this is kind of all about sort of teaching inclusivity and about how we can maybe think about this a little bit differently. So, and I think this is our friend Barata talking again, who I hope will find this and listen back to it at some point. So if you are out there listening, hello to you, and I hope I haven't butchered your name this evening. I think if there was a standard English, it would actually be boring. I agree. And this is actually said by a teacher. Another noted that children are exposed to many different accents via the media, so to expect them to encounter only RP or received pronunciation isn't realistic, and it's not what they're going to be growing up with. To achieve such inclusivity of accents in teaching, though, Barata believes that there needs to be more work in teacher training and in schools and at a government level to ensure an understanding of accents within the concept of good teaching. There also needs to be an understanding of how accents can be incorporated in a fair, inclusive manner, just like other parts of people's personalities. Beth, your thoughts on that and your own thoughts on moving forward when it comes to accents?
Yeah, I think for me, what really stands out about that quote is fair and inclusive. I think Chris touched on this a little bit more previously. Again, I've talked about pride, I've talked about cultural identity. Actually, it's really difficult sometimes for, and I know Chris mentioned this earlier, it's sometimes really hard for me to change my accent, like genuinely really difficult, and that takes a lot of effort. And I think that, you know, it's part of my heritage, it is part of my identity, and I think that there's an assumption that I should change my accent. However, if I had an accent, if English was an additional language to me or a second language to me and I was teaching, would my accent be commented upon? And that's again, it's a big conversation, because actually I'm not, again, I suppose I'm muddying the water a little bit again there in terms of me saying, well, you know, the inclusive manner of that quote is the point that I'm trying to get across there, is that in order for us to truly have an inclusive approach to how we are teaching, the accent conversation needs to have equity. So the very fact that there's an actual proven judgment through the studies that we've been talking about this evening, there's a bias there, isn't there? There's a judgment there. It's quite obvious. And obviously just from your thread, Lucy, that people have experienced it, and sometimes, yeah, tongue in cheek, but often not. So I think that to achieve inclusivity is about lots and lots of things. Inclusivity is about difference and accepting difference, and that, again, separating the celebration from the judgment, to the background to the purpose. The conversation, I think, needs separating in terms of, in order for us to actually achieve some movement and to stop people feeling judged by their accents.
There is a I think this is our friend Alex Barretta again, who proposed at one point, or wanted to propose, a nationwide survey to be sent to teachers who represent the primary and secondary levels of teaching, as well as including parents' opinions on this matter, in order to determine what the linguistic reality is or should be for British teachers. I don't know if I would ask parents about that, but let's see. Anyway, and some of the questions proposed were, and Beth, you can have an answer for these. Should Northern Midlands teachers be forced to use Southern pronunciation if teaching phonics? E.g. for Bath and bus, as we've discussed earlier. That's actually the examples unbelievably, the examples that they give.
No, I'm going to say no. I've seen some absolutely amazing phonics lessons delivered by Northern teachers. Do the children end up with secure and firm phonological understanding and are able? Yes, they do. So that's my answer. Short and sharp. There you go.
Well, I mean, as and I do agree with you. Should reduction in one speech, e.g., rather, glottal stops, be seen as inappropriate for a teacher's speech?
I don't even know what that means, Lucy.
I'm not even sure what glottal stop is. Never mind, ignore that one.
Therefore, then, it doesn't matter.
Therefore,
Next.
irrelevant. Yeah, next. Do any proposed accent standards apply solely to phonics teaching, or are they applied to everyday teaching to include the secondary level also? But what are accent standards? That's the thing. I couldn't even. What is an accent standard?
But again, it goes back to so if you go back to that teaching standard of promoting high standards of literacy, whose high standard? Who's made that standard up? And I know it's the teaching profession, but based on what? So again, we're talking about something so subjective in terms of it goes back to what Mr. Green said. If it is not getting in the way and sullying our subjects and what we are teaching, then it really shouldn't be in the conversation. It can't take away from the ability of us teaching. So, but it really shouldn't matter then, I don't think.
No, I agree with you. Just interestingly, Caroline Keep, who I also had a brief chat to, I know she had some thoughts on this. She's a Northern teacher as well. What bothers me is the subtle idea is that I'm not professional because of my accent. Beth, I know you've touched on this evening. Bothers me much more than speaking with clarity for teaching purposes. More colleagues than kids.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah,
I think again, it goes. Like, so children. Again, I've worked with children beyond Yorkshire. You know, it's a problem for the adults, not for the children. You know, it's straight from the mouths of babes is one term, isn't it? That, like, look, if a child doesn't understand what we are saying, then we will find a different way to say it. Now, again, that could be because of a misunderstanding of vocabulary and language, or a misunderstanding of how we've said that vocabulary and language. So again, the children were there to teach them. But yeah, for me, it is definitely, it's the adults, and often the adults in charge of education, that I felt judged by, rather than the children, and not, you know, and it's affected the adults, not the children, within education. I would be as bold to say that. That's my experience.
Well, that's, you know, I think you're spot on again. Paul Voss, who regularly, and I knew he would be very intrigued by this evening's show, and who I think has forgiven me for calling him a Scouser. How can you berate northern accents when every popular celebrity or presenter is northern? He also said something which I now can't find about if he was told or asked to moderate his accent in any way, he'd tell them to shove it up a word rhyming with glass or glass in your case, which we all know what that is. So thank you for Paul on that. Very, very briefly, Caroline, I can see, is here. We've got a couple of minutes, so I'm just interested to know what she's got to say, because I know she's been listening very intently. Caroline, we're connecting you up now, just very quickly. Hello.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Caroline. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've been kind of like pottering on and listening in, and honestly, I agree with most of the things that Beth has said. But I think it's more other teaching professionals, I suspect, most of the time when you have a northern accent, especially if you with southern teachers. That sounds awful, but quite often if you're with other southern teachers and you're the one with the northern accent, then it can be quite difficult there, in the expectation that you should adopt kind of a more RP type teaching method. And with the question with phonics, like, are the kids teaching northern? Because if they are, then it's going to look a bit really odd that if you suddenly start teaching, you know, northern kids how to do southern phonics. You know, you can see how this is going to go. It's not going to be great.
Nonsense, isn't it, for them? It's just complete nonsense.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't work, does it? I think you see it most vastly when you are a northern teacher trying to talk or trying to present down in southern communities or conferences I've had it, or places you go to, when you can feel really out of place. And especially when you're in professional CPD and things like that, it is this idea that you're somehow less professional. And I think that's societal as well. There is that idea of accents in the north being there's somehow that north and south divide, that the north's grim and that somehow we're missing, you know, something up here, and, you know, that we're not as intelligent as maybe down south. I think sometimes you can get that vibe. And I think all of it's nonsense. Absolutely nonsense.
I've had that as recently, Caroline, as this week. I contributed to some research, and it got fed back to me because it were anonymous. Oh, who was the girl with the really broad Yorkshire accent, but she were really intelligent?
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. Again, I thought that was one I shrugged off, because I think the person that said it from a place of, like, niceness, I think. I don't know. But again, I was like, oh, great.
Sorry, I'm sitting here with my jaw on the floor at that comment.
Hey, Beth, do you ever get the pipe down comment? Pipe down. Do you know what I mean? I've had that at conferences. Professionals. Are you bold and you brashy pipe down there? And it's oh, come on, mate. It's like, seriously? I've had that. And, you know, and I've had your tone's wrong, or maybe you should take vocal lessons, or maybe you should think more about what kind of phrases you use if you want to be deemed more professional. You get it all. But yeah, I had a pipe down at one point.
Pipe down.
Yeah, at an ed conference from a really senior ed leader, and I was trying to make a really kind of valuable point. They were like, "Oh, pipe down, you're very, brash and northern there," and it's like, "Oh, ow, that hurts, guys," and it does. It's sometimes I think it can be a bit like that, especially because I don't think a lot of northern teachers are a bit more. I think sometimes a bit more say it like it is types. I don't know whether Beth agrees with me there. So there's not a lot of beating around the bush, I don't think, up here. I don't think we've got the time or the patience.
I think we often talk about within our trust, like the power of pausing. Actually, like I think I've learned that particularly as my accent's sort of been highlighted, and like you said, Caroline, in more public arenas and things, that I've had to pause more and think about how I'm coming across. For whatever reason, I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm sorry that's been said to you though. That's rubbish.
Yeah.
Calm
I mean,
down.
to be honest, it doesn't really bother me. I'm one of those who's really brutal in my responses. So it's kind of like, yeah, that's a great one to say that one. Well done there. I mean, I'm just awful. But the truth is that if I was a less confident or new teacher, that would have hit me hard, so I think the more experienced teachers do have kind of a job to kind of call it out when you see it, just because otherwise you just end up in this scenario where you're going to have young northern teachers who are going to struggle with that, and that can extend to every kind of type as well. When you get teachers who are like me, who are neurodivergent, who are different, or teachers who have stammers, I know we know stammer teacher, or teachers who speak differently, you're going to have to take into account that not everybody communicates like RP, Royal British in the same light. That doesn't mean that their voices aren't valid in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that's a really good point to end on. I mean, unfortunately, I would love to. I could talk to you both for for ad infinitum, but unfortunately, we do have to draw to a close this evening, because I'm also sure that you've probably all got beds to go to, etc. But first of all, starting with you, Beth, it has been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you as part of the show this evening. Thank you for giving up an entire evening to spend with me, and for being fantastic for the entire time. What was your sort of parting message be on this? If you could kind of sum it up in a sentence, what would your because we've got to end on a high, of course.
Yeah, I think well, okay, so let me lean into my regional dialect, rightly or wrongly, whatever the opinion is. I think ultimately, when we're talking about accents in education and accents generally, let's create an environment whereby we ensure that our accents are celebrated within education, and that allows for our children to see positive role models, communicate and learn within their accents, not against their accents. And ultimately, I know that a colleague and a really good friend of mine has already put it in comments. I'm going to give you a Barnsley term. You've just got to berate with each other. And if we berate with each other, and that means for everybody listening, if you be all right with each other, you be kind with each other, then ultimately this hopefully one day will become a non-issue.
That is absolutely a beautiful sentiment. Thank you so much, Beth. I appreciate you so much. Mr. Green, any final comments?
Only to say that I've been a few places all over the world, and people speak differently pretty much everywhere you go. And if what you are saying is not getting in the way of learning, then it's beautiful, and let's celebrate it. Like, let's not point out our differences. Let's celebrate the things that bring us together. So,
wonderful.
Simply that.
Superb. And Caroline, the final bit from you.
Hey, how'd you come back from what Beth's just said? She summed it up really there as it
was
is. I just
beautiful,
followed
wasn't
you
it?
back. I'm like, you know what? You and me are going to get on great. I think I agree with what Beth said. There's no point trying to do this one. You better calling it out when you see it, if you feel it, and letting our kids speak in the region that they're in, how they want to speak.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you to all three of you for your contributions this evening. I truly appreciate it. Catherine Taylor is busy. She's already got started over on Podbean. So if you are up for more Teachers Talk Radio content, please do go and join her this evening. But that is it from me this evening. Thank you so much to all of you who've contributed, tweeted in, spoken to me. It has been an absolute joy, and I'm so glad I get to end on a high, particularly with that beautiful sentiment from Beth. But also I love the sentiments from Mr. Green and from Caroline as well. I am back in 2 weeks' time. Goodness knows what we'll be talking about, but it'll be hopefully as fascinating as this, and I'm sure we will come back to this topic again. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Take care, everybody, and talk soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.